Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Rizky Ananda and my ID number is T2019-6024. Here I would like to explain you about the four approach of equivalence and equivalent effect. For the first, from the theory Roman Jacobson. Roman Jacobson described three types of translation. For the first is interlingual, and the second is interlingual, and the third is intersemiotic. These structuralists focus on interlingual in order to explain linguistic meaning and equivalence. Jacobson support the relation laid out by Saussure between the signifier and signified, which form the linguistic sign. Jacobson claims that in the case of interlingual translation, the translator makes use of synonyms in order to get the source text message across. This means that in interlingual translation, there is no full equivalence between code units. It can be concluded that Jacobson's theory is essentially based on his semiotic approach to translation, according to which the translator has to record the source text message first, and then she has to transmit into an equivalent message for the text. For the second theory, from Nida and the Science of Translating. Eugene Nida's theory of translation began when he was translating the Bible. His theory gave rise to two books, Toward a Science of Translating and Theory and Practice of Translation. Influenced by Chomsky, Nida added a recent work in linguistics in order to translation into more systematic way. The nature of meaning, advances in semantics and pragmatics. Eugene Nida changed the idea in which a word in the past used to have a fixed meaning to another in which word meaning varies depending on context. Meaning is separated into linguistic meaning, referential meaning, or denotative or dictionary meaning, and emotive meaning, connotative meaning. Some techniques help the translator to determine the meaning of the different words. For the third theory, from Newmark replaced Nida's term of formal and dynamic equivalence with semantic and communicative translation, respectively. The measure of difference between the two types of translation proposed by Newmark, it is that semantic translation focuses on meaning, attempts to render as closely as the semantic and syntactic structure of the second of language allow the exact contextual meaning of the original, whereas communicative translation concentrates on effect. In other words, semantic translation looks back at the source text and tries to retain its characteristic as much as possible. Its nature is more complex, detailed, and there is also a tendency to over-translate. And the last, from the Kohler. Kohler claims that is not correspondent but equivalence, what is indicative of competence in translation. Kohler ordered the equivalence in conformity with the communicative context, language function, context characteristic, language stylistic characteristic, formal aesthetic characteristic, and pragmatic characteristic. Having identified different types of equivalence, Kohler goes on to argue that a hierarchy of values can be preserved in translation only if the translator comes up with a hierarchy of equivalence requirement for the target text. Okay, that's all for me. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.